Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. It didn't occur to me until listening to today's interview that growing up, I didn't really have a Forever by Judy Blume. A book to help boys through puberty and early feelings of sex and love and crushes and all that, which is something that today's book hopes to be. It's a novel titled Ultraviolet by Aida Salazar, and it's a very empathetic and open-hearted book about an adolescent boy going through the things adolescent boys go through. Aida spoke with Here and Now's Deepa Fernandes, and there's a part of the interview where they hit on how when boys start dating girls early on, there is this gut reaction to protect the girl, to teach the boy to not be a creep, which is all well and good and understandable, but it can leave boys wondering, well, what about us? That's ahead.
This message comes from Apple TV Plus original podcasts presenting My Devo. From the producers of Anything for Selena and the Pulitzer Prize-winning podcast Suave comes My Devo, a podcast about roots. Dive into the legendary life, music, and lasting influence of Latin America's most prolific songwriter and showman, Juan Gabriel, El Divo de Juarez. Hosted by Maria Garcia, this is My Devo, an Apple original podcast produced by Futuro Studios. Follow and listen on Apple Podcasts.
Middle school. It's that age where tweens turn into teens, when puberty begins, when hormones go wild. So what's a young boy to do when he feels the first pangs of a crush, when his body starts to change, when sex ed in 2024 is called human development, and access to this information is everywhere, but with few filters? Well, young adult author Aida Salazar looked to literature to help her tween son, and she found a huge gaping hole. So she wrote her own book, and it's billed as the Judy Blume for boys. I like to think of it as the feminist Judy Blume for boys. Her book is called Ultraviolet, and Aida joins me now. Welcome to Here and Now.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Aida, I have a son who just turned 13, and he'd kill me if I gave up his life details here on the air. But let's just say he's going through exactly what your main character is. So I'd love you to start by telling us about boys this age and the needs that they have that we as a society are possibly not giving attention to.
That's the same conclusion that I came to as a boy mom. As I researched this book, I found that our patriarchal society has really victimized boys in as much as it does girls and gender-expansive folks, because they're not allowed to feel, to express that everybody else is allowed to do because of the patriarchy.
You know, I think all of that is set in a time, Aida, when we as parents talk to our kids about a lot of things, including things that no one ever talked to me about when I was that age, like puberty and developing bodies. We talk to our sons about respecting girls, asking for consent. And I'm just wondering, you know, young boys are also facing a barrage of other information and messages to be masculine, even toxic masculinity that streams across social media. It must be so confusing for them.
Never in the history of humanity have children had so much information at their fingertips, unfiltered information on top of that. And so I think it's really difficult for boys and young people to navigate both of these worlds, the world of even progressive or free-thinking parents or people who are trying to raise them in a way that's more dignified and open, versus the world that disregards and doesn't honor them in the same ways and doesn't honor their age or their development.
So let's talk about your book and how you wrote it, because it's not your standard novel. It mixes verse with prose and really sometimes sparse but beautiful word choice. It's fast-moving yet deep. Why did you choose to write this way?
Well, I'm a poet, and most of my novels are in verse. So I chose to use poetry because it has this very powerful way of communicating feeling. Billy Collins, our former poet laureate, said, "Poetry is the history of the human heart." And because the story is really about a boy's heart, what his feelings are and what he goes through, I thought it would be a perfect way to express that very close interior space that we have as humans.
So tell us about your main character, because I found him so real and relatable, both to my own son, but also just to, young men who I see out in the community.
Well, Elio is a wonderful character. He came to me on the first page totally alive and totally feeling and totally connected with the world. He is a boy who loves music, has fallen in love for the first time and sees everything in ultraviolet colors. And he is amazed by what's happening to his body. He's also afraid of bees, puberty, and girls. And so he's going on a journey about discovering how to be strong, how to love oneself, and how to grow into a good human being.
And he's being raised by two totally fascinating parents. I love the mum. I could really relate to her. She's an unapologetic feminist raising a young son of color. Tell me about her. Is she modeled on you?
Absolutely. I had to sneak myself in there somehow. This is the thing about this book, is that I use this character as a way to speak to my feminist perspective on how to raise young boys, on how boys need to be more expansive than they've been allowed to be. And so the mom character really represents that perspective, that feminism, but also the tenderness that I want for all of our boys to be able to have.
And let's just explain that a little bit. I related it a lot to my own 13-year-old who, when he told me that he'd asked a girl at school to the Valentine's dance, which was the first time he'd ever done anything like this, I gushed at first, and then I told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to treat her with respect and that I was squarely on her side. And he was kind of taken aback, but he listened to me and we had some good conversations. I'm just wondering how your main character processes the feelings of a crush with knowing he has to respect her and ask for consent for all his actions. I mean, these are kinds of conversations that we're having with our boys these days.
My main character, Elio, really does this acrobatic back and forth, feeling confused and then very certain, and sometimes really in wonder about how to treat a girl, and looking to his mom sometimes, for instance, when he doesn't know what to do when she tells him she has period cramps. He goes through the entire range of emotions, and it's part of understanding another human being that's not of your gender, right? Is trying to understand what they might be going through. This really is about empathy, right? It's about reaching outside of yourself and understanding how somebody else hurts and how somebody else lives. And so Elio's trying to do his best, but like all 13-year-old boys and all 13-year-old children, really, he makes mistakes.
And the character of the father is fascinating. He's on a journey as well as his son is coming of age. Just briefly tell us what you wanted from the father character.
Oh, Pops is a complicated guy because on the one hand, he's like progressive and he's supportive partner. But then on the other hand, he's very steeped in these traditions of masculinity that come from his Mexican heritage. And so he takes his son to cockfights, but then he takes his son on a bike ride. And sometimes he tells his son he loves him, but then he stopped doing it. And so sometimes he is like a protective father, and sometimes he just doesn't know what to do.
You dedicated the book to your teen son. Has he read it? What does he think, Aida?
Yes. Well, I have his consent for all of the things that I tapped him for. He was my number one focus group. And because he was so open with me about everything, when he had his first heartbreak, he told me, "Mom, I feel like all color has left life." And he told me also, "Mom, I feel like it hurts right here." And he touched the middle of his chest. And so he's been my inspiration. And I tapped him for language and also all of the funny things around puberty. Like he would scream from the other room, "Mom, I've got a smell coming out of my armpits." And it was just this hilarious experience to witness him going through puberty with his candor. So he has given me so much material, but also his consent, and he thinks Ultraviolet is the best.
And what do you think we as a community, as a society, need to do better when it comes to raising our boys? I mean, I'm also raising a teenage girl, and that's it has its own challenges and complexities. But I'm wondering, when it comes to boys, do you have a larger message for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we are able to address that our patriarchal system has really wounded boys as well as it has wounded girls and gender expansive people, we are getting to the heart of unraveling some of this toxicity and this violence that we see in the world. When we can acknowledge that boys have tender hearts, can be weak, can be in love and sweet, then we are allowing them an entire landscape of human emotions that we have previously denied them. And so my message is to be, to feel, to hurt, and learn how to lose. And that violence is not the only expression that you have as a result of being wounded.
Aida Salazar's novel is called Ultraviolet. Aida, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch. This message comes from NPR sponsor Merrill. Whatever your financial goals are, you want a straightforward path there. But the real world doesn't usually work that way. Merrill understands that. That's why, with a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan and a clear path forward. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer, registered investment advisor, member SIPC.